Welcome to the D Word Podcast. The name is Dion, and welcome to a brand new episode about life and conversations. Today, I want to talk about boundaries and setting healthy boundaries in your life. If you may ask yourself, what is a boundary? I don't know what a boundary is. Let me give you a good example, right? When you have a house that has fences on either side, you protect your home from intruders and the safety of your family is in check. But imagine if you didn't have boundaries. Anybody could walk in and walk out of your home, which means there's no boundaries and there's proof of it. The same goes with life and the conversations you have with people. Sometimes you could come across somebody who will ask you something personal, and you would be a little bit scared to ask the person or answer the person. I recently was in a conversation with somebody who asked me a very personal question. And the first time the person asked me the question, I was reluctant to answer because my boundary was I don't want to answer it, so I'm going to keep silent and move on. And then the person asked again, and then I was still a bit reserved to answer the question. The third time they asked me the same question, I screamed, boundary, boundary. And they were like, what do you mean, boundary? And I was like, I have a boundary against the question you asked me. That's why I ignored it. But because you persisted, I said the word boundary because I don't want to answer it. And I don't know you well enough to answer that question. All of us have boundaries in our life. And some of us don't have any boundaries with the people we communicate with. If somebody asks you something personal and you don't want to answer it, you need to set a boundary against that person and the question. And if the person who asks you the question without thinking, hey, I don't have any boundaries because why am I asking this question? It's like this. When you were in your 20s, people always asked you, when are you getting married? Now, we all have been asked that question. And I remember the first time I got asked that question and I was like, well, I don't know you well enough to answer that question because I have a boundary in place. And then the other part of that was, I don't know you well enough to answer that. And the third part was, you don't have the right to ask me this because you don't have any boundaries. If you were close enough to me, I would answer that. Now, we can give you many examples of people with boundaries or without boundaries, but let's give you an example of people without boundaries. And I'm going to tell you a story of the lockdown back in 2020. And the lockdown of 2020 was fun because all of us had to stay at home and do stuff. So I can create lots of English dishes. But this time around, back in 2020, I tried to do a curry, right? And I was quite happy of what I did, and I wanted to showcase it. So what I did was I put it up on Instagram. People loved it. People said, hey, congratulations, wow, wow. And that's the support I wanted, because when you put it out online, you want people to say, hey, well done. But people with no boundaries can't stay silent. They have to give you their opinion, even though nobody asked for their opinion. And back then, on Facebook, I deleted the post because everybody was so mean to what I did. So whereas they not understanding, I posted it not for an opinion, but to show what I did. You giving me your opinion when I didn't ask shows how you lack boundaries. Now, you can't question the intellect of somebody like that. You can just move along. So what I did from back in 2020, and the people on Facebook don't know this, is I have boundaries in place. I don't post anything personal on Facebook built on the quality of people and how they will respond. So if I know I post something personal on Facebook and everybody who's a critic, who's not even aware or self-aware of the boundaries, I know what I'm going to get. So my boundary is don't post anything personal on Facebook. However, on Instagram, I do post personal stuff, but I know it's a safety net. So I have my boundaries set on social media, right? The same goes for people in real life. If you know somebody is not close to you, but they ask you questions that are too personal, you have a choice to answer them and show you don't have boundaries, or you can tell them you're not close enough to me to answer that question, all right? All of us need to be self-aware of situations that come across in our daily life. Boundaries can be with friends, colleagues, family members, even people who you do business with. Boundaries is a game changer for your peace. And if you don't know what boundaries are and how they can enhance your life, look around you. Ask yourself, how do you deal with people who don't know what boundaries is all about? Let me give you a bit of a sidebar note to this entire issue of boundaries. And if you live your life with the approval of everybody else around you, and I've met many people like that where they got to have people approving them and their self-worth and everything else around them. And if you continuously do this for yourself, you are giving the control to somebody else to decipher whether you're happy or not. But also, what you're also defining for yourself is that you lack boundaries. Boundaries is a very broad word, but I think the first boundary we all should set is what we share with people. If you trust somebody, then you can share things. But if you're unsure whether the person will remix your truth and gossip it, then you need to set boundaries with that. I'm very self-aware, but I still learn a lot about this often. When I go around in a room and if I don't know somebody, I will not speak. Purely because I'm sussing out the room and saying, do I trust that person? Do I trust that person? Okay, fine. I trust that person, so I will share. And even if I do share, I watch what I share. It takes me back to a story my wife and I had before we got married. True story. We set a boundary that if we have anything to talk about within ourselves, we will talk to ourselves first, then share it with other people. And I see lots of people who are married and they openly talk about their married life to other people. That's lacking boundaries because your partner is your team player. You should be discussing whatever you have with each other to each other, not to the whole world to validate what you guys are or not, right? But I see many people do that. And if you are that person, stop letting down your partner. Your partner is part of the same team as you. Set the boundaries where if you guys have an issue, you guys talk about it together and not reflect it to the entire world to judge. Boundaries can be healthy for many people. Another example of boundaries is that if you have family members that don't converse with you, they don't talk to you at all. But whenever you come across a family member and they only contact you when they need something, you need to set boundaries against that person. Boundaries does not mean it's bad. They may not look at it the same way as you, but boundaries are for you protecting your peace. So how does one look at this boundary situation, especially with family members? If family members only contact you whenever they need something, they are not family, firstly. They are relatives. Family, I believe, can be friends. It doesn't necessarily mean blood relatives. Could be friends that are family. Family is built on people who trust you, who root for you, who value you and want to do more for you without you even asking. They don't only contact you when they need something or they need to relay something to you. So you need to set a boundary with that. Boundaries could be like if you know somebody's calling you just to tell you something. Have a boundary, don't answer the call because you know what it's going to be about. If you know somebody is mean to other people and you want to be friends with them, understand where you are taking your peace with this person. I want to give you many examples and I can write a whole list. I'll spend the entire day talking about that on this podcast, but I'm going to pick a few randomly, right? Because this podcast has no script. I don't edit my podcast. I let it free flow and share from my heart. The first boundary you should set is what you share with people and what you answer with people. Number two, another boundary that you should have is people who do you wrong, set boundaries with them, which means you can still talk to them, but you don't have to give so much that is irrelevant to them, right, in the conversation. The third one, which I think is a very important boundary, is you can forgive somebody, but it doesn't mean you can't have boundaries against that person. Forgiving them is great, but I think people misguide the fact where they have a reset button after somebody is forgiven. You can forgive somebody, but you must never forget what they're capable of, because trust is earned, not reset when there's a forgiveness word sent out there. I want you to think about all the boundaries you have in your life and ask yourself, do you have boundaries? How can you set them in your life? And if you said, I don't know if I have any boundaries, then maybe now is a good time to set them. Talk about it in your quiet time to yourself or to somebody who you trust and ask them, do you think I have boundaries? And if you don't, maybe now is a good time to think about how you can set them. I will talk more about boundaries in next episodes of my podcast, but I felt that I needed to land it for the first time. And I hope that you enjoy these conversations, because I know giving you food for thought is essential, but I share these podcasts to give you food for thought that will make you better, not only for yourself, but for those around you. So think about boundaries today. Set them if you have not set one. And remember one thing: you're valuable, you're loved, you're cared for, and people who understand that will understand where you're at if you have boundaries in your life. Thanks for checking out the D-Word podcast. It's available everywhere, and brand new episodes drop on a Monday here on my socials. Have a great day. Set some boundaries now, right? Take care.